So for a GitHub repo, under the Insights tab, you can gain lots of statistical graphs about the repo. And so Insights contains the following tabs. We got Pulse. This is an overview of recent activity. Contributors, a list of contributors and their activity stats. Community standards, commits, code frequency, dependency graph, network, forks. And I want to point out that on the exam, I had to know the contents of some of these, which I think is really silly, but that's how they did the exam. And so it's important that you pay close attention here of what kind of stuff can show up on these pages so you can identify which category of graphs they're talking about here, or charts, or whatever you want to call them. And I noticed that Repo Insights is not listed as available in the free tier, but I think if it's a public repo, it shows up. So maybe they're talking about for private repos. I didn't thoroughly test it, but I just wanted to point that out about that there. Let's go take a look at all of these in more detail. The first is Pulse. This contains pull requests, open close ratio, issues, open close ratio, summary of activity, graph of top contributors, list of merge pull requests, list of issues closed, list of issues open, list of unresolved conversations. Remember this one, because this one will help you narrow down or rule out the rest, because this one is a little bit more complex than other ones. Then we have contributors. This contains a graph of all commits over a time period, a graph of a specific contributor commits over a time period. Then we have community standards. This is a checklist of recommended, I spelt that wrong, but recommended community standards and how much a community profile has completed. This graph will only show for repos that have community profiles. So community profiles are open source projects on GitHub. And I think you have to turn it on to turn yours into a community profile, okay? We have Repo Insights. So this contains a number of commits per week for the last 52 weeks for a year. That's how many weeks there are in a year, so that kind of makes sense. The average number of commits by day of the week for the selected week. Then we have code frequency. This contains the amount of additions and deletions of a code repo, or sorry, of code to a report per month. I really wrote that weird, but you get the idea that you have additions and deletions over time. And I noticed that for really large repos, they can't even render it. So this is not really useful for large open source projects, but you can see it in smaller projects. And that's what I said right there down at the bottom. We have dependency graph. This contains list of dependencies, list of dependents, and export software bills of materials, also known as SBOMS. So security and compliance teams increasingly request software bills of materials to identify open source components of their software projects. They assess their vulnerability to emerging threats and verify alignment with license policies. So it sounds like a good thing for security folks. Then we have the network graph. This thing is super useful, especially when you're working on or you're utilizing an open source project and something goes wrong. I will jump into this and try to find other commits from other branches or forks to get the functionality that I need in my application. So this will show the 100 most recent pushed forks. You can read the commits to determine the difference of these forks. Then we have forks itself. So this contains a list of filterable forks, very similar to the last one, but this is just a list of forks. And the other one is over time, and it's visualized. But yeah, I just want to point out that you do need to know these ones, even though, again, I think it's a bit silly, but yeah, you're going to have to know specifically like what they're doing on these pages or graphs, okay?